Welcome to Findmypast first webinar on 100 years of electoral registers 1832 to 1932. My name is Jacquie Carter. I work at the British Library, where for the past 15 years the electoral registers in our collection have been my responsibility. The electoral registers are a list of people entitled to vote. In this webinar I'm going to give a brief overview of the British Library collection, some information contained in the registers and what they are used for, and a quick look at how they complement the census records that you're all used to using. Now, the British Library has about 150 million items. If you put them on one shelf, they would take up 625 kilometres, so they would stretch from London to Skye, the Isle of Skye in Scotland. The collection is growing at about 12 kilometres a year, but since the move to electronic publishing, this figure is reducing. The electoral registers sits within the official publications collection, which is in itself 43 kilometres. By 2014, the electoral registers were taking up 3.62 kilometres or 2.25 miles. They're increasing at a rate of 800 volumes each year, and if the collection continues to grow at the current rate, which is about 41 to 42 metres a year, by 2024 they will spread over more than 4 kilometres. Now, the British Library has the only nationwide collection of non-current electoral registers received under representation of the people legislation. Electoral registers are lists of people entitled to vote. Before 1947, we have about 25,000 registers. A handful of those were entered in what was then called the General Catalogue of Printed Books, and now our catalogue, the online successor, is called Explore the British Library. Before then, we only had old-fashioned Cardex cards for recording what registers we had. Until 2010, you had to use the heavily annotated book by Richard Cheffins called Parliamentary Constituencies and Their Registers since 1832. It was published by the British Library in 1998. It's no longer in print now. It was £37 in 1998. In 2006, I saw a copy on eBay for £109. But this is now available as a PDF. It's continually being updated, and it can be found on the British Library website under Help for Researchers, and I put the URL in there, and the introduction has been fully updated, and you'll find a lot of information there about the franchise and all sorts of other bits and pieces about the registers. After 1947, the registers we have are complete for the whole of the United Kingdom, England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Now, my next few slides cover what the British Library has. Starting in 1832, that's when registration began. We've only got a handful of registers from then, between then and 1863, that have been put into the general stock. So in 1863, a concerted effort was made to acquire 1863 and backruns. Some registers supplied do go back to 1832, but the majority were not complete. Some constituencies continued to send registers, but others did not. So this might explain perhaps why you're not finding the person that you're looking for. There are gaps in the British Library collection. Some local libraries and local archive offices might be able to fill in the gaps, but our collection is not complete. So in 1885 there was another attempt to get electoral registers for the British Library, then the British Museum collection, and the result of that was that only the year 1885-86 was received, but there were no backruns. But this time most, but not all of them, all of the constituencies continued to deposit until 1915. In 1915, registration was suspended because of the First World War, so we don't have any up until 1918, when you then get only the constituencies previously supplying registers. They continued from 1918 until 1931, so we're quite incomplete then. In 1932, as I said, we were part of the British Museum. Regulations dated October the 12th, 1932, but not published until 1935. They listed publications excluded from legal deposit, and among excluded ephemera were electoral registers. This results in another gap in our holdings. It's debatable whether electoral registers are ephemera or not, but obviously somebody decided that they weren't, and you get a complete run for 1937 to 38. It's nearly complete in 38. Now, in 1939, we have the Second World War. There were registers issued in 1939, but we don't have any, I think it would be true to say, because there were 2 in 1945 and 1946, but we've only got 4 of those. There were no electoral registers issued between 1940 and 44. In 1947, the British Library received its electoral registers under electoral registration regulations. I quote the legislation there. And from 1947, our holdings are complete for the whole of the United Kingdom. But we're only looking at the first 100 years. Now, if you go back to those first 25,000 registers, in 1987, the British Library started a microfilming programme for all registers from 1832 to 1938. However, there are still about 1,400 volumes for England left to film, and about 1,111 volumes for Wales. Added together, I make that just over 2,500 volumes, which is approximately 10%, if my maths is correct. We have a so far unknown quantity of Scottish registers, only one of which has been filmed, Linlithgowshire. If we did a generous estimate, say 2,500 registers for Scotland, then this should make about 20% left to film. However, only those microfilmed before 2011 have so far been digitised by Findmypast. Now, I have some additional information of different types, and different types of information have come and gone over the years. So we've got some relevant dates. Between 1832 and 1948, we have a nature of qualification to vote, which is quite interesting because it has all sorts of strange reasons for why you would have a vote. Some of them were because they had stables, some of them were because they owned some woods, so it is very enlightening. From 1885 to 1915, you get a landlord or a landlady's name, often the weekly rent and number of rooms rented for people qualified to vote under the lodgers franchise. Now, if you put in lodger into the search, you'll get some amazing results that are completely unexpected. And it's because their landlord or landlady had the vote, and the amount of money they paid per year fitted the requirements. Now, women were not explicitly banned from voting in Britain until the 1832 Reform Act. We had poll books before then, and in 1835 also the Municipal Corporations Act. I think it's just a debatable point. They put in, I think it's wordage, I think they put in that men who conform to certain requirements would have the franchise, the right to vote. It didn't say person, it said men, and this seems to have excluded women. Now, in local government elections, single women rate ratepayers received the right to vote in the Municipal Franchise Act of 1869. This right was confirmed in the Local Government Act 1894 and extended to include some married women. Between 1869 and 1928, you get the names of women ratepayers who had the municipal but not the parliamentary vote at that time. From 1878, you get lists of people entitled to vote at municipal but not parliamentary elections, and nowadays this includes peers of the realm and non-British European Union citizens. So you can vote for your local councillors, but you can't vote in a parliamentary election for MPs. In 1918, you get armed service details of absent voters, and also in 1918, the Representation of the People Act enfranchised women over the age of 30 who met minimum property qualifications. In 1928, in the Representation of the People Equal Franchise Act, women over 21 were included on the same footing as men. From 1951, just as an aside, you find the names of young people coming of age in the lifetime of the register, nowadays including their birthday. But modern registers are quite boring in comparison to the earlier ones because you just have names and addresses. You don't have all these wonderful reasons and qualifications, and you don't perhaps have an address. You have somebody who was living behind the church or up the mountain or whatever, and it's really quite fascinating. I find it so anyway. Now, this slide shows some information contained in the registers and what they're used for. The map of Newport, I'm going to discuss later. You find that there are legal cases nowadays to help prove the right to buy, and they're used for criminal record checks. They can be a treasure trove for all kinds of historical research, including political and local history. I should imagine if you're looking at this site at the moment, you're using the registers for genealogical research, but let me assure you they can be used for so many different things. Right, as I was saying, you can find out all sorts of information from these registers. Thinking of political history, the development and evolution of parliamentary constituencies, I was interested in the Isle of Wight, Newport, because obviously being an island, it has limits on how many boundary changes it can have, and probably the number of people who inhabit the island. Now, we have particular conventions for the names of constituencies. It shows how difficult it can be if you've just got the name of the place to actually find out the correct constituency. Here we've got the parliamentary constituency of the Isle of Wight, started in 1832, came into existence, and the British Library holds 1865 to 66, and 1937 to 38, and 1947 onwards. Now, it did undergo a name change. It was called something else at one time, and it is listed under the Parliamentary Borough of Newport, and we have 1854 and 1859 to 66. Now, when somebody says Newport, you might not think of the Isle of Wight, you might think of the town in Wales, in Monmouthshire or Gwent. Just showing an illustration of how boundaries change, local authority boundaries. For the Parliamentary Borough of Newport, which came into existence in 1918 and lasted until 83, we've got 1937 to 38 and 1947 to 83. In 1984 it obviously became too large, and it divided into two, so you've got Newport East and Newport West, and we have from 1984 onwards. Now, I've recently discovered another Newport, which is actually in Shropshire, so it's under the parliamentary constituency of Shropshire, Northern or Newport Division. It existed from 1885 to 1918, but we only have 1885 to 86. So I've also said that we have some very interesting material in there about the history of women. From 1869, women ratepayers, and they were a rarity until the reform of married women's property law, they had the municipal vote, and they increasingly appear on electoral registers in that capacity until they received the parliamentary vote, partially in 1918 and fully in 1928. Many women also had the vote because of their husband's profession. Single women owning property also had the municipal vote. If you've seen the recent film Suffragettes, you'll see at the end a listing of other countries and when women got the vote in those countries. In Sweden there was, I'm not sure exactly what going on, but between 1718 and 1771, various ages of women, and probably, again, maybe single, maybe married, whatever, and that was between 1718 and 1771. New Zealand, women got the vote in New Zealand in 1893. Now, Turkey, women got the vote in 1934, but as of 2015, in Saudi Arabia, women still haven't got the vote. So then I had a look at some famous people, because the British Library's collection of electoral registers is arranged by parliamentary constituency, and this makes the process of identifying the required register very laborious, and some of the boundary commission maps are hardly adequate for the purpose, but it's still essential to verify the constituency one way or another, as the place name, as I've shown with Newport, alone cannot be relied upon. Because of this arrangement by constituency, it cannot be emphasized too strongly that printed electoral registers are of very little use in tracing named individuals. So this is where the census up to 1911 comes in handy, and where the digitization of the electoral register collection from 1832 to 1932, which has just been released, it's going to transform the use of electoral registers beyond belief, and turning the collection into an absolute treasure trove of information of all sorts. Now, I thought I would have a go using the printed electoral registers at finding out some information about a famous person, and I decided that William Ewart Gladstone, who was Queen Victoria's least favourite Prime Minister, as he lived in a castle which is spelt Hawardn, and I don't know how to pronounce, probably Harden, I suppose. Now, when he was Prime Minister, was he registered in London, if he was living there, or was he registered at his castle, and quite how did that work? Now, I thought a castle would be easy to find, but I had to check. I checked 3 different types of registers, for Mould, for Cheshire, and I finally found him in the register for Flint. Now, I'll say a little bit more about Gladstone later, because like everybody does, I think, when we're doing family history, when I was looking at the City of London registers for 1892, I found a wonderful list of livery companies and members entitled to vote. And it was just incredible, the sort of thing that you could actually find. You've got the lists of the livery companies, and you've got the addresses in the rest. You've got the addresses of you've got the names of the people, and then you've got the addresses where they actually lived, as well as them having this vote as a parliamentary elector, because they're a member of the London liverymen. Now, when you look at this list, it's absolutely amazing, because you've got 127 barbers, you've got 90 blacksmiths, but you've also got 90 farriers. You've got 124 butchers, but 298 fishmongers. The 100 fan makers are an interesting example, which I'll come back to later. And you've got glovers, 87 glovers. Next slide, you've got gold and silver wire drawers, and you've also got goldsmiths, 159 of those, 150 grocers, 350 haberdashers. Now, one trade I'd never come across were loriners. There were 429 of them, and they were involved in the maintenance of manufacturing standards in the trade and the encouragement of the proper use of bits, spurs, stirrups, buckles, bridles, saddle trees and other metal parts of horse tack. You've got 99 makers of playing cards, 118 pewterers. Poulters were set up to regulate the sale of poultry, swan, pigeon, rabbit and small game. You've got 100 tallow chandlers and 300 wax chandlers. So I said I was going to look at William Gladstone again. This slide demonstrates the different naming conventions employed by Findmypast and the British Library. In 1880, this shot is taken from the register which Findmypast have called South Lancashire Constituency, Liverpool. In actual fact, what the British Library calls it is the Parliamentary Constituency of South Lancashire, South East Lancashire Division, and it's the polling district of Liverpool. Now, polling districts are the basic building blocks of constituencies. At the moment, there are about 35 to 40,000 of these, and this is how they come into the British Library, and we have to bind them all together. We do that in constituency order, but obviously you can appreciate it does take some time. Now, at the bottom of this screen, you will see that William Ewart Gladstone. You'll see his address, his place of abode, which is normally what they call it in these days. Those days, he was living at Hawarden, near Chester. It's not calling it a castle though. And he's got his nature of qualification, freehold house and land. And it's a bit confusing because you've got details of address here, which he may or may not have actually been renting out, because he was living at Hawarden Castle, so it's a bit confusing where this other house fits in, but I'm sure somebody will really enjoy investigating that. Now, this is another way of looking at the history of your house, because the address, again, at the bottom of this 1865 register, you've got Seaforth House, the place where Gladstone is living at the time. He's living in London at Carlton House Terrace. But you've got what looks to be very similar house registered. You've got Seaforth House, whereas the previous one was Claremont House, and it was in South Seaforth. We would call this the Parliamentary Constituency of Lancashire Southern Division, and you'll find it listed like that in the book I was referring to before, Parliamentary Constituencies. Now, I thought I'd have a little look at how the electoral registers complement the census records. The census is only taken every 10 years, it's only released after 100 years, it records everybody at the address, so even if you're only 1 month old. It's easier to search now from 1841 to 1911 because it's available online through Findmypast. But it was handwritten, so you often find misspellings because the handwriting is very difficult to use, to read. And sometimes, spelling in those days was, not as it is today. One interesting thing we found when we were looking through the registers, some people, their nature of their qualification to vote was because they owned a sewage works, but you will find that under sewer age in some of the records. So that's quite something to bear in mind. Now, having a look at the City of London registers, these lists of liverymen, I thought I'd try another tack at finding somebody in the census this time as an unusual name. In the 1901 census, I found Thomas William Oldwinkle. His house, Saratoga, in Dacre Road in Forest Hill. And you can see the details of him and his family and his servants there. Now, I had found him in the electoral registers, in the list of liverymen, but it helped me find him in the census and get the extra information. Now, this Thomas William, he's listed as a fan maker in the electoral register that I spoke about, but he is also listed in the census as an architect. So this was quite intriguing. Was fan maker something other than what I thought? So I carried on looking, and also in 1901 I found Thomas's brother, Alfred O. He was a silk merchant, so probably this fan making was a family business, and it helped with the having a silk merchant in the family as well. So I'm looking for information going, forwards and back in the census. Sometimes there were misspellings, which I believe have been corrected now. And in 2011, when I was checking, the only way I could find Thomas was through his son, Granville, who had actually been misspelt, but this has been corrected now. And luckily for me, he was 11 months old when I was checking the census, so I could find out all sorts of information. And interesting to see that they still have a couple of servants. I did find in one of the other examples, you've got a person called Jabez, but I only find him in 1861, and there's no trace of him anywhere else. So whether he went abroad or he died, I'm not sure. So you can go further back. You've got 1861, and so then I've got information from the census, I've got information from the City of London list of liverymen, and I continue to find Thomas William in the electoral registers for quite a number of years. I've tried 1890, 91. Okay, so we've got information that I've got from the London electoral registers for Thomas William Oldwinkle. And you'll find that the information is in there for quite a selection of years, and when you actually get a copy of the listing in those registers, you can see he's right at the top, Thomas William Oldwinkle, and that image is from 1902, and you can see where he lives, Saratoga, Dacre Road, Forest Hill, and you can see that he is in the livery company, the fan makers. So I've gone through the registers, and you'll see on the next few slides, I'll just go through them quite quickly. You'll see the nature of their qualifications to vote and family members with the same name, and you can look through those at your leisure. And you can see how you can get sidetracked when you start off on something quite simple, but I'm sure you're all used to that, really. So, having done that, I have come to the end of my presentation. I hope I've not gone on too long, but I'll quickly pass you over to Alex Cox to talk you through the search.
Thanks, Jackie. Searching Findmypast's largest single collection is a straightforward process. You can search across the approximately 220 million names captured by the register by first and second name, polling district, county, constituency, and also by keyword search to discover the history of your family home in the 19th and 20th centuries. The great thing about electoral registers is that they were compiled annually, which means it's likely that you can find multiple records for individual ancestors. Each record contains a scanned image of the original document and a transcript box. The details recorded in the registers can vary slightly depending on the exact date at which the register was taken, but normally you'll find a combination of the following information. Each record is displayed as a PDF document. As mentioned earlier, the details in these documents can vary depending on the constituency and the exact date at which they were taken. However, most will include a combination of your ancestor's name, their address or abode, the nature of their qualification to vote or a description of their property, or, if they were renters, the name, description and residence of the landlord or other person to whom their rent was paid. Occasionally, registers can also include your ancestor's occupation and age. The format of each register can vary depending on the constituency or the year. The normal arrangement is in address order, that is to say that within the register for each polling district, streets are listed in alphabetical order and the properties within them are listed in a sequence which is not always the same as in numerical order. Of course, rural remote areas are not susceptible to street arrangement of the registers, and in such cases voters are normally listed in alphabetical order of surname within the smallest unit of a local administration. This can be the parish, community or townland. Electors are listed by surname followed by their first name. The registers with the richest information for researchers were those issued between the 1885 redistribution and the First World War. They are also the most complex, with several sequences representing the different franchises within registers for the same polling area. The different franchises are the reason for the extra information. Voters listed at their residence with a business franchise will have their business address also listed, and those with the lodger's franchise will have their weekly rent, the number of rooms rented, and the name of their landlord, or more usually landlady, listed as well. The transcript box is a small text box on the left-hand side of the screen. The transcript boxes can reveal your ancestor's constituency, the year the record was taken, the polling district or place. This will include the polling districts or wards, but civil parishes are not indexed and will need to be searched by keyword, the county, the country, the original archive and British Library self-mark, and the image number. It is important to note that registers are dated using the year they were compiled, not the year they were in force, as is the British Library's practice. For example, a register of persons entitled to vote between the last days of November 1852 and the first day of December 1853 will be recorded as the year 1852. Searching a PDF is a different experience to searching transcribed records. As with Findmypast's newspaper archive, the electoral register searches will pull out results using optical character recognition, or OCR. OCR is the electronic conversion of images, typed, handwritten or printed, into machine-encoded text. While OCR proximity matching has its limitations, you can still find things which would be otherwise very time-consuming, needing you to trawl through reams and reams of microfilm. When searching for names, you will notice how the results are based on proximity. As the results are picked by how close together the words are located on the page, a search for, say, a Henry Smith would also bring back results for a William Henry Smith, or a search for a John Smith may return a John Prickett who happened to live on Smith Street. It is also important to note that the name variant search box will not work with PDF searches. Instead, try searching for your ancestor using multiple spellings of their name. For example, your great-aunt Catherine may have spelt her name with either a C or a K, or possibly the Brooke family may have used an E at the end of their name at one point, but not at another. You can get around this by using the keyword field to do a wildcard search. By inserting an asterisk on either side of a word, it will search for various spellings of that word. For example, placing an asterisk either side of the name George will return Gregory, George, or abbreviated forms of the name. In some registers, the first names were abbreviated, so if you cannot find your ancestor by their first name, try an abbreviated spelling. For example, say your ancestor was called William, they could be listed simply as a W or as WM. Searching the records by address or constituency is a fantastic way to uncover the history of your home. As registers were taken every year, and occasionally twice a year, you can follow the history of your home. You can follow the history of your address through the registers and uncover the details of previous proprietors. To search by address, simply enter the town or city into the place field and the street address into the keyword field. Once you've found the address you're looking for, you can then follow it through subsequent registers. In this search experience, you are searching through the original text as it was recorded at the time. Therefore, it is quite likely you will come across local variants or accidental misspellings. Constituencies have changed throughout the century as voting laws developed and the franchise was extended. To find your ancestor, try searching through multiple constituencies or places. For more information about the changing nature of the constituencies over the years, refer to the British Library's Parliamentary Constituencies and their Registers since 1832 guidebook. This can be found in the Useful Links and Resources section of the search page, found at the bottom right of the page. Many of the registers will also include a street index or directory at the very beginning of the document. You can either access these directories by clicking the previous button on the PDF screen, or you can start a new search for the constituency and year and then order your results by image number. In doing this, the top image would be the first page, and you can then click through the remaining images from the very beginning. You can also view a very handy Electoral Registers Map outlining the coverage of the collection throughout England and Wales. This is also accessible through the Useful Links and Resources section of the site. So, thank you very much for listening, and a massive thanks to Jackie for guiding us through this enormous and fantastic record set.